We have stopped this one, but there will be another one coming, and it will not be stoppable by us.
A frightening prophecy about the vulnerability of our digital universe. From a malicious cyber attack that swept the globe to posting every intimate detail of our lives online. Are we too addicted to our devices? Are we safe from technology streaming at us 24/7? The gatekeepers of information have been kicked to the curb, and now everyday citizens are unlocking a brand new, sometimes scary world. Our digital lives. Are we out of control? I'm Molly Thomas.
And I'm Sheldon Neal.
And you're watching Context. The world has just witnessed one of the largest ransom attacks in history. A Canadian cybersecurity expert weighs in on the latest global ransomware attack. Obsessed with your digital devices? Is posting and sharing online quenching a deep thirst within you? Balancing our digital lives in techno-human times. We hear from a leading psychologist. Plus, can faith be a defining factor on the World Wide Web? We hear from a company in Canada's Silicon Valley that is completely changing the conversation. Before we talk tech, let's get to your top news stories. Controversy yet again out of Washington, where U.S. President Donald Trump is being accused of sharing classified information with Russia's foreign minister.
It's wholly appropriate for the president to share whatever information he thinks is necessary to advance the security of the American people.
It is said to have happened in a closed meeting, even though pictures of the president and the Russian ambassador were leaked to the press. Speculation continues over what exactly was shared. Both Democrats and Republicans are upset. Trump already made headlines this week when he fired FBI Director James Comey, the lead investigator into whether Trump's advisors colluded with Russian officials to win the 2016 election. Well, for those that love to fly, a new passenger bill of rights is on the way.
Airlines would have to provide clear information in simple, understandable language to all travelers. There would be minimum compensation standards with regards to overbooking and lost or damaged baggage.
The transportation minister also announced joint ventures of 2 or more carriers to coordinate scheduling and pricing on certain routes. The government also wants more foreign investment in Canadian airlines, changing the limits from 25% ownership to 49%. These rules are set to take place by 2018. And Canada's outgoing commissioner of the RCMP shed tears this week over long-standing complaints of harassment under his watch.
We failed you. We hurt you. For that, I'm truly sorry.
2 external reviews have concluded that the force has failed to deal with long-standing claims of workplace harassment and mental health problems. Many ideas are on the table now, including a civilian board of management, but oversight of officers inside the force could still remain the job of the commissioner. Top Mountie Bob Paulson is set to retire in June. Now to our topic of the day. Once again, we are seeing how vulnerable our digital world is and how tied we are to technology. The global cyber attack WannaCry is affecting companies around the world. Hospitals and even governments were digitally paralyzed after computer files were held for ransom. Sheldon Neal now with a cybersecurity expert to find out if you could be at risk.
Well, let's start with the recent cyber attacks that have occurred. More than 200,000 victims in 150 countries affected by this cyber attacks, banks, government agencies, schools affected. What just happened here?
I mean, basically, we witnessed one of the largest ransom attacks in our history. Basically, a whole bunch of countries, and this started in the UK, but went to over 150 plus countries. As of today, 250,000 infected computers plus corporations. Basically, a ransomware called WannaCry. It has various variations to its name. It goes into your computer, exposing a vulnerability in Microsoft XP, an older generation system. It utilizes the file sharing protocol vulnerability, and it attaches to different computers, encrypts your data, and asks for a ransom payment.
So is this a sophisticated type of approach? Obviously, I'm guessing. Is that correct to assume?
You know, it's semi-sophisticated. I mean, we see a lot of those type of attacks out there, and I think even the attackers were not ready to their success on this particular one. I mean, some of this vulnerability was exposed during the last leakage from the NSA and CIA with the various espionage tools that they're using. So this was found in that bucket, that there's a vulnerability in XP, and that's what the bad guys were trying to leverage.
Now, this virus, as you explained, basically holds files ransom on your computer so you pay. Can it get into files on the cloud? Because some people think, well, the cloud is the place of safety, but is that necessarily true?
So, I mean, as it stands right now, the reason it doesn't go necessarily on the cloud, because the cloud does not use that particular platform.
Okay.
So the cloud works a little bit different. If the cloud had an XP version on them, then absolutely the cloud will be affected. Right now it handles computers and servers and any other systems that hold the XP or Windows 8 platform as their system, operation system.
So when people see this, or they start reading about it, fear, worry, anxiety grips people. They start wondering, should I back up this system, back up that? How can people really protect themselves? What's the advice you would give?
The best advice that I can give is actually to have regular backups of your data. So when something like this happens, you can just nuke and blow up the computer. You can reformat it, reinstall your information, then you don't have to pay ransom and you're not losing real data. Patching is very important. I know patching. Everybody always talk about it. Patching is important. Keep your computer up to date. Make sure the security is installed on it, and keep that at top of mind. But again, really the best ways is patching and backups of your data. That's really the only way to deal with this type of attacks.
We're headed in a direction that's highly more digitally sensitive, digitally driven. Are we going to see more of this in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, ransomware has been here for years. It is going to escalate with different versions. We were lucky on the last one by a researcher that found basically a kill switch. And every real ransomware, malware has a kill switch. The bad guys always put a kill switch there so it doesn't get completely out of control, right? So everything has a kill switch. He was able to stop this one. By Sunday, we already had new versions of this popping up. But again, people were alerted, people were prepared. That's the reason the effects were not as bad. But this is here to stay. This is a weapon of choice for the bad guys.
Well, can it be prevented? Some people were saying, can we get some companies, great minds together to put some type of block? Can it be prevented?
Unfortunately, you can't really prepare for this too well outside of, again, following protocol like consistent audits, backups, make sure your security and patches are up to date. The only real way to avoid this stuff of situations in the future is to hold the manufacturers responsible when they produce products, that there's much deeper quality and audits into the products before they're given to consumers. It's really in the front end rather than the back end. We all focus on what I call on a reactive approach. In the future, we need to start acting on being proactive. Right, so we have to make sure and hold the manufacturers responsible that all of their things are prepared with a better security consciousness around it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And the WannaCry malware is, of course, subsiding. But we've heard that an upcoming undisclosed blockbuster Disney movie is being held for ransom. So some systems are still being affected. Molly, back to you.
Thanks so much, Sheldon. Well, from trying to keep our digital files safe to sharing everything we possibly can online, I know you've done it, I've done it as well. Social media cannot be sidelined in this digital discussion. Now, new research from the Booth Business School in Chicago says social media websites may be as addictive as alcohol or cigarettes. And according to them, the only thing better, sleep and sex. Now, many assume social media is a new phenomenon, but this might surprise you. Take a look. Back in 1973, Community Memory popped up in California. It was an online bulletin board operated by coins, and anyone could publish messages to others by typing them into that computer terminal. Then 12 years later came the WELL, or the Whole Earth Electronic Link. First, the WELL community gathered for discussion and conversation, and that's where we got the term virtual community. Fast forward to 1991 when restrictions were lifted on the commercial use of the internet, and then 6 Degrees popped up, a social network where people could meet others based on interests. Sound familiar? Blogging took over in the 90s, MySpace, of course, and LinkedIn turned up in the new millennium, but it was 2005 that really tipped the scales when Facebook and Twitter became available worldwide. Now you may be wondering, who's winning the social media game? Can you guess it? Take a look at this. With more than 1.9 billion active users, of course, Facebook takes home top spot. WhatsApp comes in second, which is, by the way, Facebook owned. And number 3 goes to Facebook Messenger. So Mark Zuckerberg's brainchild continues to dominate the market. Perhaps the biggest difference with social media in 2017 versus the decades before is that we now create our profiles, our personas, to really showcase our best or worst selves to the world. And sometimes this world is unbearable to even watch. Now, you may remember at the end of April, a live video surfaced on Facebook of a Winnipeg girl being pummeled while unconscious. RCMP are investigating whether it's tied to the murder of 19-year-old Serena McKay. And a man in Cleveland who killed an innocent older man who was just passing by posted that video to Facebook. It took over 2 hours before it was removed. And this past January, 4 teenagers were charged after a vile and horrific attack on a handicapped man was captured live online. Just an incredibly eerie and disturbing effect of the online world. Evil acts clearly on display there. You know, I want to bring in James and Sheldon into this conversation. James, you have a background in tech, in technology, in business and theology. Sorry, I said that wrong. Whose responsibility is it when a live stream goes violent?
Let's be honest, it's painful to watch. And I think we have to step back and think about this for a second. It is everyone's responsibility. So it's the responsibility of the individual who did that online. Then it's the responsibility of the company that allowed this to get online. They have to work harder. And then it's culture's responsibility. So who's thinking about that individual and the future individuals that could be doing that? What role are we playing in that?
Sure, and who's speaking into culture? That's a huge,
right.
huge part of what we talk about in context. You know, live at one time, guys, was only about newscasters, right? An editor always held the key to what actually appeared on air. That has totally changed. James, you know, can and should everyday people have these live capabilities?
I take the position of yes, and I'll tell you why. I think, I look back in history and I think when the printing press came, everyone got up in arms saying, no, you're gonna let everybody else have this information. Sure. Like you look at even at priests and they want to control that, but then suddenly it developed so much quicker. And now I think we have an opportunity to use that. We've just got to work harder to guard what happens with it.
So Sheldon, I want to ask, you know, companies like Facebook say they rely on the public to actually flag bad or illegal things online, but that obviously isn't working so well.
That's right. I actually spoke with Daniel Tobuk, CEO of Cytelligence, and we kind of really dug deep into this. And he says social media platforms need to be a lot more proactive about what's actually being posted online. And he says we're talking about filters. And what are really filters? We're talking about mechanisms that would really attach itself to keywords, violent related stuff, sexual misconduct. And when that happens, the red light goes off and they can kind of analyze what's really going on. But that raises the big question, as we spoke about, can users really be trusted? He says yes, but there's much more to think about. Let's go to that clip right now.
We have platforms and technologies that are emerging for us as consumers and businesses, just unfortunately in the wrong hands. It all depends on how people use them. It's exactly like having a gun. Some people are licensed and they shoot their gun at target practices. Some people can take it to the next level and perform a violent crime. A car is the same thing. A car can be a weapon. So it's not about, I think, limiting the exposure or access to consumers or businesses. It's about what they do with it.
So Sheldon, what are companies doing then? I mean, to curb that violence? Like, what are they actually doing?
Well, let's talk about the big one. Facebook, the social media platform, has been trying to deal with the rising problem of people really committing suicide on its live streaming service. So it's really been beefing up suicide prevention on its live streaming platform in a few ways, teaming up with support organizations such as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, offering live chat support, and is currently testing, which I thought was quite interesting, artificial intelligence that will function to identify warning signs related to self-harm. I see you shaking your head, or other things. A Facebook-led researcher for suicide prevention, Jennifer Guadagno, said, in this way, live becomes a lifeline. Powerful. It opens up the opportunity for people to reach out for support and for people to give support at this time that's critically important. Powerful.
Yeah. James, let me come back to you. Can the public play a role in putting more pressure on companies to do more, even more than what Sheldon's telling us?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. It's built in the DNA of how a tech company is structured. So a tech company ultimately says, how can I bring greatest value to my customer? But when your customer says, this is the value I want, and pressure comes over and over and over again, they're going to make changes. It's just inevitable.
That's right. All right, James is back with us later in the show. We're going to keep talking about how faith is factoring into the wild world of tech. But coming up next, what some of you had to say about social media.
All the time, way too much probably, yeah.
How about yourself?
Yeah, but I'm not a big Snapchatter, yeah, like all day, basically.
What does 24/7 tech do to our minds? Is distraction a cause for worry? Stay with us. The psychology of technology is next. Here are some of the stories making headlines this week.
Voters turning their outrage into online worldwide trends.
Why healthcare workers kill.
The opioid crisis is a health crisis.
So how do we weed out the noise?
Well, this is an issue our next guest is an expert on.
We have a lineup of religious leaders from the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith communities.
I'm Lorna Dueck.
And I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Molly Thomas.
And you're watching Context Live.
And Sheldon, of course, people are using social media in positive ways as well. We don't want to overlook that. Give me an idea about the campaigns that are bringing joy, that are bringing happiness.
Will do. Let's get to it. Tell America it's great again. You might remember Make America Great Again for the 2016 presidential election. Well, Canadians stepped it up a bit. Let's take a look at the screens. And as you'll see here, hashtag Tell America It's Great. Essentially, Canadians all across the country started posting videos to encourage Americans who perhaps might feel a little bit down on what's going on in the U.S. A very powerful movement. I want to move on to something powerful. WestJet Christmas Miracle. Let's go to the screens on this one. Essentially, people from WestJet reached out to Fort McMurray after the wildfire that swept across the land and said, "You are not forgotten. This Christmas, we're throwing you a Christmas party." Over 800 in attendance. They gave away free flights. Powerful. Check it out online. I want to go to our last one. Becca Schofield, a 17-year-old girl from Riverview, New Brunswick, battling brain cancer. Let's take a look at the screens. She didn't ask for Canada to take a look at her. She said, it's time to move in acts of service, and said, I want Canadians to post acts of services online. First one, helped push a car out of a snowbank for a couple who went off the road. So much more. Hashtag Becca told me to. Powerful movement. Check it out online if you have the chance. For now, Molly, back to you.
Whether good or bad, we are consuming it all online. Professor Larry Rosen is an expert in the psychology of technology. He joins us from California today. Professor, you say our brains haven't really evolved since the caveman days, yet technology is coming at us from our phones, from our computers, from social media 24/7. What effect does that have on us?
Well, this has multiple effects. From a psychological level, it really changes our psyche and changes our behavior. There's evidence that it could lead to depression. There's evidence that it can lead to anxiety. But I'm actually more concerned about what goes on in our brain. And what it seems to be doing is technology seems to be sucking us in, for lack of a better term. And so we feel like we always have to be connected. And what's going on in our brain that makes that happen is when we're not connected, we feel we're missing out on something. Some people call it FOMO, fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, what our brain does is it leaks a little chemical called cortisol, which makes us anxious. And when that gets enough cortisol in your body, your brain goes, I better check in to reduce that cortisol. And so you check in, and what we find is most people under the age of about 40 check in every 15 minutes or less. And then what happens is the whole process starts again.
Constant cycle. Doctor, I want to ask, we've been talking about the evil acts sometimes committed on social media platforms, often live, we've seen recently. Not only people that post them, but also the followers that watch that. What does that say about us as humans? I mean, it seems like we get some kind of sick pleasure out of it.
Well, we're getting something out of it. It's not clear what, but it is really compelling. And I think part of it, there's two reasons. One, because it has to do with connection. We're connecting with other people, with other events, with things that are happening. But also it happens on a platform, generally Facebook or Twitter, that we spend a lot of time on now. Evidence shows that we're spending hours on both of those platforms every day, checking in constantly, commenting, liking, posting pictures. And so that drags us in even further. And so when there's something on there that we see, we naturally click on it. And if it's a video in particular, that drags us in.
Now, spending those hours, that sounds like an addiction to me. Can we equate this with other things like food addictions or alcohol addictions? Is it the same in your view?
So it's tricky. Some people call it an addiction. But that's only one possibility. An addiction would signify that we're doing an activity to get some pleasure. And if we are checking into Facebook and smiling a lot and getting a lot of pleasure, then we're probably addicted. And what that means behaviorally is that we ignore other people. We need more and more time on Facebook, more and more time doing it in order to get the same feeling. I happen to believe that a lot of us aren't doing it out of pleasure at all, but what we're seeking is to reduce that anxiety. And the only way to reduce the anxiety is to check into Facebook. And that would be more likely an obsession or a compulsion rather than an addiction. It works on two different chemical systems in the brain.
A little bit narcissistic in there?
Well, there's certainly narcissism is an interesting variable because it's used a lot to predict behavior. And the more people are on Facebook, the more friends they have, the more narcissistic they are.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to talk about restorative balance and self-awareness. You talk a lot about that in your books. How do we get there in our digital lives?
Well, I think one thing we have to do is that we have to recognize that this did not happen to us very quickly. iPhone is only 10 years old. It's taken a while for us to get kind of sucked into this device that we carry in our pocket or our purse or more than likely our hand. And so what we have to do is learn to back out slowly. One of my suggestions is that you find what you check in on, and then what you do is either make a schedule. So say you check from Facebook often. Then you say, I'm only going to check Facebook every half hour or every hour. If that doesn't work, what you do is turn off all your devices, put your phone in front of your face upside down, set the timer for 15 minutes, and do not let yourself get distracted for 15 minutes. When 15 minutes comes up and the alarm rings, you get 1 minute to look at anything you want and then repeat the process until you get very comfortable going 15 minutes without checking in, which is scary that we can't do that. It's frightening. And then once you get good at 15 minutes, then make it 20 and 25 and 30. And if you can get up to 30 minutes of concentration, of focus, of attention on work, on family, on a family meal, in a car trip, anything, then you're doing pretty well.
Great advice, Dr. Rosen. I'm going to have to take that for myself because I am guilty of this as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Dr. Larry Rosen, professor of psychology at California State University. We've seen the harm that a cyber attack can inflict, online evil through acts of depravity. We've also seen the good in social media. But where does faith fit in the picture? Up next, from Canada's Silicon Valley, a company coding for a higher cause. Here are some of the stories making headlines this week.
Voters turning their outrage into online worldwide trends.
Why healthcare workers killed.
The opioid crisis is a health crisis.
So how do we weed out the noise?
Well, this is an issue our next guest is an expert on.
We have a lineup of religious leaders from the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith communities.
I'm Lorna Dueck.
And I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Molly Thomas.
And you're watching Context Live.
Back now to our digital lives. How do the people directly affected by a viral video cope? Well, a bus monitor who was verbally assaulted by a group of angry young boys told Lorna Dueck her story at the time it went viral.
Tell us what it felt like.
Well, I didn't cry. I just tried to make it go away. I knew the boys would be off the bus soon, and they had never really done it to me before. So I kind of ignored most of it. And I didn't know that the one boy was videotaping it.
I hope maybe we're going to raise a bit just to get on our vacation. 30 days, maybe we'll raise some, maybe not. Everything's good. But in a few hours, we'd beat the 5,000, and then it just kept on going. People kept spreading it.
Spreading indeed. The love that is. That student Max Sidoroff and more than 30,000 people from 80 countries around the world helped raise $700,000 for the Karen Klein's Foundation, and an evil act turned around and into the light. Well, check our website for the full interview. Our sister program, C Shift, will also have an upcoming story on the effects of cyberbullying.
James Kelly is back with us, founder of Faith Tech, a company trying to bridge the gap between faith and technology. James, you know, we've heard a lot of negativity today around tech, but you are passionate about positive things online. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just over a year and a half ago, I heard this phrase: in the midst of devastation, there's an opportunity for innovation. And it completely changed my life. God and I had my family in a context where we were seeing the hurt from our neighbors and in our city. And then he also has us in Waterloo, Ontario, which is one of the fastest growing tech cities in the world. And I simply asked, who's working with the tech innovative crowd to help those on the margins? And from there, it exploded. And now we're starting to see, just really in the last year and a half, more and more people starting to say, okay, technology is changing us. What do we do with that? And then there's a whole group of people that have these incredible gifts and talents and abilities with technology, and they haven't known what to do with them. Sure. And so we're trying to say, here's incredible opportunities.
Let's talk about, you know, Faith Tech seeing the need around suicide online. How are Christian coders changing the conversation around that?
This is crazy. So we discovered that here in Canada, over 6,000 people a month search the phrase, how to kill yourself.
Wow.
Disturbing, 6,000. Disturbing part is that number one search result is 7 easy, painless ways to do it. The fourth one down is a YouTube video, and this is real. It's not just kids searching this. So we said, how do we change this? A group got together, 2 web developers, communications manager, and a psychotherapist. They bought the domain, howtokillyourself.org.
That's what we're looking at right now on the screen, and it's howtokillyourself.org, but there's actually helpful tips.
Well, look at this, right? Ask yourself, here's the difference. You're not alone. Their end goal is to replace all that garbage on page 1 with that.
And you can do that with Christian coders can do that.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. I want to ask James, you know, YouTube says that they can't keep up with negative propaganda from, let's say, groups like ISIS, even just putting bad things online. What and who are you up against as a small, you know, Christian company? Yeah,
absolutely. Here's the hard part in that. One of the biggest groups we're up against right now is the church. And what I mean by that, I love the church, but right now the church is very fearful to use technology, to think about technology, and we're talking in the context of addiction, which I think we need to talk about, but we also need to recognize that this is the greatest opportunity in the history of the world to use technology for good than we've ever seen. And I think the church has an incredible opportunity to step into that, use the resources and people it has to do things we've never been able to do.
James, you called technology an addiction. The doctor we just spoke to, he had said it's more of an obsession. You're sticking with addiction there.
I'm sticking with addiction. Over 75% of us check our phone within 5 minutes of waking up. So statistically, I'm gonna check what random person messaged me overnight before kissing my wife good morning.
Sure.
That's a serious problem. And I think we're just starting to see the effects of this, where people can't get away from it, where they're shaking when they have to put it away. I think we need to start talking about this.
James, we have 30 seconds. Tell me, what is the vision for the future with Faith Tech and Christians coming together to change the conversation?
It's both and. From one perspective, it's how do we think about technology in a way that's healthy for us, putting in good rules and regulations for us personally and as a culture, but also to recognize right now we can use these Christian developers in very powerful, beautiful, wonderful ways to change the world, and we need to step into that and do it.
Amazing. James, thanks for being here. James Kelly is the founder of Faith Tech. If you want to learn more about his company, visit faithtech.ca. Stay with us. Our final thoughts are next. Wow, lots to take in there.
Very much so.
Lorna will be back again next week. Until then, you know, Sheldon, what really gripped you about the conversation around technology today?
Well, you know, in short, what I hear is like the power of human agency, that no matter what offering is given to us in our hands through social media, we, the user, depend if it's going to be positive or negative. We decide that, which means it's going to be harder to police, but unfortunately, we're stuck with it.
Sure, and we all know, you know, like you said, technology is not going anywhere.
That's right.
So, you know, as James is saying, we don't want to run from it. We want to be influencers and speak into it. So, yes, wonderful time to talk about technology. We hope you enjoyed the show. For all of us at Context, thanks so much for watching.
Tweet or Facebook us. Goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.